So, Will, there is a piece of media out there, a news mag, called Filter, that we happen to rely on every single day for its coverage. Are you the man?
I'm one of the people, but yeah, I'm the founding editor-in-chief of Filter and an executive director of the Influence Foundation, which is the non-profit behind it.
So how did you come up with the idea for Filter?
It actually evolved from some past websites that I founded and ran, which were on the general issue of drug policy and harm reduction, somewhat similar. Had the problem of being owned by commercial interests in the rehab and recovery space, and so they weren't necessarily a good fit for my own agenda. And so a group of us got together and thought, well, what if we could create a mission-driven non-profit in order to have a publication with a real harm reduction agenda.
So, I mean, we've had Alex Norsha on the show, we've had Helen Redman on the show, fantastic resources. I mean, I have to tell you, the level of coverage and reporting in Filter is outstanding.
Thank you very much. I'm lucky enough to work with some outstanding people.
Yeah, no, it's really good. And so how do you get so deep? How does Filter get so deep into the issues?
It's a combination of sort of strategic planning in the in-house editorial team and giving reporters time to really dig into stories while trying to meet the requirements of being a daily publication. At the same time, idea generation often happens very organically. We've had, I think, 200 plus people write for us about different subjects at this point, and when you have such a network of informed people with different perspectives and different expertise, then they'll come to you with ideas, and we very often adopt those, and so it gives us more than if we were simply 5 people in a room trying to think of articles.
So was tobacco harm reduction part of the founding ethos issue for Filter, or was it something that editorially you moved into?
It was always part of it. We are in favour of harm reduction for all drugs, including nicotine, and indeed as that lens applies to areas that aren't drug involved at all. For example, sex and sex work, for example. And yeah, I mean, I think you can't be a sort of full service harm reduction publication and ignore tobacco harm reduction. That would be absolutely absurd, given that, as we know, smoking is the biggest cause of drug-related death in the world. It may not get the headlines of the overdose crisis equally, very important, very tragic, but the fact that 8 million people annually are dying of smoking, and that harm reduction alternatives exist to prevent these deaths, and that these alternatives are being blocked and indeed targeted by all kinds of entities, as we've been hearing today, is outrageous, and we need to be communicating that.
Why is there that blockage? Because arguably there's been softening in more the hard drugs harm reduction. That's the gold standard. You hear AIDS and
yes,
heroin, opiates, and so forth. But it seems that most in the media, public health, government, and the lay public don't seem to recognize tobacco harm reduction, say, maybe as a valid, execution on the theory.
Yes, I mean, I think that there are several reasons. One of them, of course, is the involvement of the tobacco industry, which isn't the case with those other substances. And of course, the tobacco industry has a reputation that is so toxic that it turns off a lot of people who should be supporting, tobacco harm reduction for human rights, health equity, and all kinds of other good reasons. Another is that THR is a form of harm reduction that has largely happened without the intervention of public health in a top-down way, and so you've got some people in public health, as we always hear, who with a historical enmity for the tobacco industry, also seeing a solution to smoking unfolding organically that didn't come from them, and so double the reason to oppose it, and sometimes in very surprising cases.
So just a couple of quick questions left. First of all, FDA, appropriate for the protection of public health. We've seen Views get a marketing authorization. In your estimation, what's going on in the U.S. in regards to FDA?
If I could answer that question wholly and accurately, I would be more informed than anybody else alive. However, I think it's a mixed bag. We've seen a real war on nicotine in the United States for all the reasons you're very familiar with. FDA approving for the first time a vaping product. It was a hugely significant step forward. On the other hand, it comes with all kinds of caveats. For example, it seems that only super large companies, often with tobacco backing, are able to complete the arduous process in a way that gets it accepted. Then again, very importantly, we're seeing all kinds of flavored products have been rejected, and the war on flavors continues. And we know that many adults rely on flavors to be able to switch effectively. And so if it's kind of just a partial approval of one limited product that very few people relatively use, you could almost see that as death by 1,000 cuts. And so it remains to be seen what will happen with the rest of the big players. We're seeing legal challenges unfold to the MDOs that have already been issued, which perhaps gives hope to some of the smaller and medium-sized players. It's very much up in the air. We've had a step forward with that one approval, but my goodness, that saga is not over yet. There's a very long fight ahead.
And WHO, FCTC, COP9 coming up. What are your thoughts on COP9? What's your message if you could give COP9 a message?
Well, clearly the message I would like to give them would be to adopt harm reduction immediately and start saving millions of lives. What I'm hearing from a lot of advocates, though, is that the fact that tobacco harm reduction is not on the agenda at this rather clandestine meeting could in practical terms be a sort of win, because if it were on the agenda, it would probably be something bad done with it. There's that. And what some people are saying is that simply by stalling the momentum that's going against tobacco harm reduction right now, while the markets and the uptake of THR products continue to grow in the meantime before it's addressed at COP in 2023, that it could be a sort of win, albeit things are moving much more slowly than they should, and every delay costs lives. So some mixed messages I'm hearing about that situation.
That's an interesting take, though. That's a strategic way of looking at it.
Yes, and of course the whole situation is absurd, unforgivable, whatever adjective you want to apply for it, that the world's leading health agency, which adopts harm reduction in all kinds of other domains, is continuing to deny and block tobacco harm reduction, which has the most life-saving potential of all.